Family invited me to vacation without children, but when I arrived there were my sister's children. We didn't have any extra money for your son, Mom said. I left and then. My family invited me on what they repeatedly called an adults-only vacation. No spouses, no partners, no children, just my parents, my sister Emily, and me. So imagine standing in an airport after paying for everyone's flights and discovering Emily's two children wearing travel backpacks while my own son was sitting at home because I had followed the rules. Then imagine my mother looking directly at me and saying, almost casually, "We didn't have enough left for Noah." That was the moment I understood the vacation had never been about reconnecting. It had been about seeing how much they could take from me before I finally said no. My name is Cara Bennett, and by then I should have recognized the pattern. My parents had always been good at making requests sound like opportunities. Whenever they needed something, suddenly I was the responsible daughter, the generous daughter, the one who understood how important family was. When I needed something from them, everyone somehow became very busy. Still, when Mom called and proposed a trip with just Dad, Emily, and me, I let myself believe things might finally be different. Like when you girls were younger, she said warmly, before life became so complicated. I wanted that more than I cared to admit. The only problem was money. I told them immediately that I couldn't afford some extravagant family getaway. Daniel and I were doing fine. But between rent, bills, and raising Noah, there wasn't a pile of vacation money sitting around. Mom assured me the accommodations and most expenses were handled. I only needed my flight. Something about the numbers didn't completely make sense, but instead of questioning it, I did what I always did when my family made me feel wanted. I overcompensated. That night I found a decent fare and bought 4 tickets, mine, Mom's, Dad's, and Emily's. Nearly the moment I sent the confirmation, my phone rang. Mom sounded genuinely emotional. "Cara, sweetheart, you didn't have to do that." For once, being generous felt good. Daniel was less convinced. He sat beside me on the couch, staring at the confirmation email. "You're sure Noah isn't allowed?" he asked. "Because if Emily suddenly brings her kids—" I cut him off with a laugh. Mom had been extremely clear. No children. Daniel gave me the kind of look people give when they know your family better than you want them to. I hope you're right. I kissed Noah goodnight before leaving for the airport on departure morning, promising I would bring him something ridiculous from the gift shop. The guilt of leaving him was there, but I reminded myself that nobody else was bringing children either. Then I stepped into the terminal and saw Mia and Jack. They were standing between Emily and my father, laughing and spinning little rolling suitcases in circles. Mia had a neck pillow around her shoulders. Jack was holding a stuffed dinosaur. They weren't there to say goodbye. They were dressed for the trip. I stopped so suddenly that someone behind me nearly walked into my suitcase. Emily noticed me first. Her smile became slightly too bright. "There she is!" she called. "Aunt Cara, look who's excited!" I stared at her. "Why are your kids here?" The atmosphere changed instantly. Emily glanced toward Mom. Mom glanced toward Dad. Nobody looked surprised by the question, which told me they had already discussed exactly how this conversation would happen. Mom finally stepped toward me. "Don't start, Cara." "Start what?" "You told me no children." Emily sighed. "Things changed. Apparently." Mom lowered her voice. "After you bought the tickets, we had a little more room in the budget. We decided the grandchildren shouldn't miss out." I looked from Mia to Jack, and then back at her. "The grandchildren?" Mom's expression tightened. "Noah is your grandson too. We know that. Then where is his ticket?" Nobody answered immediately. Dad stared toward the security line as though he hoped the conversation might disappear if he ignored it. Finally, Mom said, "We didn't have enough extra money for Noah." For several seconds, I genuinely couldn't process the sentence. "Extra money?" "Cara," Emily interrupted, "please don't make this ugly." I looked at her. "You brought both of your children to a vacation I was specifically told was adults only, and you think I'm making it ugly?" She gave me that familiar, wounded expression. "Mia and Jack have been looking forward to this. Noah would have looked forward to it too if anybody had bothered inviting him." Mom crossed her arms. You work constantly. We thought you might enjoy a few days without Daniel and without having to worry about Noah. I actually laughed. So now, excluding my son was a favor to me? You're twisting everything. No. I'm finally hearing it clearly. Dad stepped closer. Enough. We're here now. Let's check in and enjoy ourselves. That sentence told me everything. They had expected anger. They had expected an argument. But underneath all of it, they had also expected me to surrender because the tickets were already purchased, and everyone was already standing in the airport. They believed momentum would trap me. Unfortunately for them, they had forgotten whose credit card bought the flights. I pulled out my phone. Emily's face changed. What are you doing? Fixing the problem? Cara. I opened the airline app and pulled up the reservation. Mom's voice sharpened. Put your phone away. You wanted to decide which grandchildren deserved the vacation. Fine. Now I'm deciding what happens to the tickets I paid for. Emily grabbed my wrist. Don't. I pulled away. Never touch me like that again. Kara, the children are standing right here. Then maybe you should have thought about them before building their vacation around a lie. Dad muttered my name like a warning. I pressed the cancellation option. For 1 second, nobody spoke. Then my phone displayed the refund confirmation. Emily went pale. You actually canceled them? Yes. Mom stared at me as if I had slapped her. You selfish little... Careful, I said quietly. You've already told me enough about what you think of my family today. Emily's eyes filled with furious tears. Mia and Jack did nothing to you. And Noah did nothing to any of you. That finally silenced her. I turned my suitcase around and headed toward the exit. Behind me, Mom shouted for me to come back. Dad demanded that I stop embarrassing everyone. Emily yelled that I was punishing children because I was jealous. I never turned around. By the time my cab left the airport, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Mom. Emily. Dad. Mom again. I ignored every call. What I didn't know yet was that canceling the vacation wouldn't be the part they hated most. The part they truly couldn't forgive was that I had stopped obeying. When I got home, Daniel took one look at my face and didn't ask whether the vacation had gone badly. He just said, "What did they do?" I dropped my suitcase beside the couch and told him everything. From seeing Mia and Jack in the terminal to Mom saying there wasn't enough money for Noah. Daniel's jaw tightened more with every sentence. So they let you buy the tickets, waited until you were trapped at the airport and expected you to accept it? I nodded. Pretty much. He shook his head. That wasn't spontaneous, Kara. They planned that. I knew he was right, and somehow hearing someone else say it made the betrayal feel worse. I had barely finished talking when someone began pounding on the front door. Not knocking. Pounding. Daniel glanced toward the hallway. Please tell me that isn't them. I looked through the window. Mom, Dad, and Emily were standing on the porch. Of course they were. I opened the door only a few inches. Go home. Mom immediately shoved it wider and walked in as though my house still belonged to her. Dad followed, then Emily. All three were wearing expressions that were supposed to look concerned but mostly looked angry. Daniel stood beside me with his arms folded. You have about 30 seconds to explain why you're here, he said. Mom's entire demeanor changed when she saw him. Her voice softened. Daniel, I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. My stomach dropped. Mom, don't. She ignored me. Kara was upset because she realized she didn't want to leave you and Noah after all. Instead of admitting that at the airport, she blamed us and canceled everybody's tickets. For several seconds, I was too stunned to respond. Emily actually nodded along. We understand, Kara. You wanted time away, then felt guilty. You didn't have to turn it into this huge thing. Daniel looked at me, not suspiciously, but almost in disbelief that they were attempting something so transparent. Is that seriously your story? He asked. Dad stepped in. She obviously regretted leaving home. We're not judging her. I stared at them. You lied about Noah being excluded, and now you're trying to make Daniel think I secretly wanted to abandon him? Mom sighed dramatically. Nobody said abandon. Daniel's expression hardened. No, you're just implying she wanted a vacation from being my partner and Noah's mother. Mom gave him a thin smile. We love Noah. We simply didn't have enough money to bring everyone. Daniel laughed once without humor. But you had enough for Emily's 2 kids after Kara paid your flights? Emily started to protest, but Daniel cut her off. No, I heard enough. You came into our house to rewrite what happened because you don't want to admit you excluded her son. Get out. Mom looked genuinely offended. Daniel, this is a family matter. Then why did you drag me into it by lying about Kara? He answered. Emily turned to me. You're really going to let him talk to us this way? That old instinct rose inside me, the one trained over years to smooth things over whenever Mom or Emily became uncomfortable. But for once, I didn't obey it. You should be grateful he's asking you to leave calmly, I said. Mom muttered something about disrespect as they walked out. Dad didn't say another word. Emily shot me one last wounded look before the door shut behind them. For a while, Daniel and I simply stood there. Finally, he said, They were trying to make us fight. I nodded. I know. That was the part I couldn't stop thinking about. Canceling a vacation was one thing. Trying to damage my relationship because I refused to be manipulated was something else entirely. The next morning proved they weren't finished. Daniel came into the kitchen holding his phone. You might want to see what your mother posted. Mom had written a long Facebook message without using my name, but there was no doubt who it was about. She talked about how painful it was when children forgot everything their parents had sacrificed for them. She wrote that some people chose anger over family, and that a mother eventually had to accept she couldn't force an adult daughter to appreciate the people who loved her. The comments were already full of sympathy. Aunt Linda wrote that Mom deserved better. An old family friend said she had always been an incredible mother. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years wrote, Family should come before pride. I stared at the screen, amazed at how quickly they had transformed themselves into victims. Then I saw Emily's comment. I've tried everything I can to keep us together, but Kara has made her choice. We have to respect it and move forward. My anger sharpened immediately. She hadn't tried anything. She had stood beside Mom at the airport. She had helped lie to Daniel in my own living room. Now she was presenting herself online as the exhausted peacemaker. I called her before I could talk myself out of it. She answered almost instantly. Kara, please. I've been trying to reach you. I skipped the greeting. Delete your comment. There was a pause. What? You heard me. Delete it. Emily sighed. Kara, you're making this worse. Mom and Dad are devastated. I laughed. They're devastated because their free vacation disappeared. That's not fair. Neither was telling me Noah couldn't come while your children were standing at the airport. She became quiet for a moment before lowering her voice. You embarrassed them in public. That sentence told me exactly where she stood. So, that's what matters to you? That they were embarrassed? I'm staying neutral. Neutral? I repeated. You're posting comments supporting their lie. I'm trying not to make enemies. Something about the way she said it made me pause. Emily had always been selfish, but she was usually more direct. This sounded frightened. Why are you so desperate to keep them happy? She didn't answer. Then everything clicked. This is about your debt, isn't it? Silence. Emily owed almost $40,000 between credit cards and personal loans. For months, I had been quietly giving her money, paying chunks of it down whenever I could, because she constantly told me she was drowning. Kara, don't do this, she whispered. I leaned against the kitchen counter. They promised to help you, didn't they? Another silence. Emily. Finally, she exhaled. Mom said they might help me get everything under control. I almost couldn't believe it. So you're defending them because you think they'll pay off your debt. It isn't like that. Then tell me what it's like. She started talking quickly about keeping peace, protecting the family, not wanting Mom and Dad to cut her off. I barely heard her. All I could think about was every payment I had sent her while she cried about interest rates, every time Daniel and I postponed something because I was helping my sister. You know what? I said quietly. You should probably ask Mom and Dad for the next payment. Her voice changed immediately. Kara, wait. No, you made your choice. I never said I was against you. You didn't have to. Please don't stop helping me over one argument. This isn't one argument, Emily. You watched them exclude my son. Then you helped them lie about me. Then you went online and backed them publicly because you thought it might get you money. She started crying. But for once, it didn't change my mind. I can't afford this without you, she said. Then maybe you should have considered that before treating me like an ATM with feelings you could ignore. I hung up before she could answer. Daniel was sitting at the table when I put the phone down. He studied my face. You cut her off? I nodded. She sided with them because she thinks they're going to rescue her from $40,000 in debt. Daniel leaned back slowly. Do you think they actually will? I thought about my parents and the way they used promises like strings attached to people. No, I said. I think they'll keep dangling it until she gives them whatever they want. Daniel reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Then, maybe she needs to learn what happens when she chooses them. I wanted to feel relieved, but part of me still felt sick. Emily was my sister. I had spent years believing protecting her was part of being the older, steadier one. The following morning, someone knocked hard on the door again. Daniel looked up from his coffee. If that's your mother, I'm not opening it. I went instead. Emily stood outside alone. Her hair was unwashed, her eyes swollen from crying, and she looked nothing like the smug woman who had stood beside our parents at the airport. Kara, she whispered. Please. I didn't invite her inside. What happened? She swallowed. Mom and Dad said they're not paying anything. For a moment, I simply stared at her. Anything? She shook her head. They said my debt is my responsibility. They said I need to learn to manage my own finances. A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. So you betrayed me for money they never planned to give you. Emily flinched. I made a mistake. No, you made a decision. Tears rolled down her face. I can't do this without you. There it was, the familiar sentence that had controlled me for years. For half a second I almost gave in. Then I remembered Noah sitting at home, while Mia and Jack stood at the airport. I remembered Emily helping Mom twist the truth in front of Daniel. I remembered her Facebook comment. I'm sorry you're scared, I said, but I'm not fixing this. Her mouth fell open. Kara, please. No. You're my sister, and I was yours when you helped them humiliate me. I stepped backward and closed the door. On the other side, she stayed there for several seconds before I heard her walk away. Daniel looked at me from the kitchen. I expected guilt to crush me. Instead, for the first time, I felt something unfamiliar. Quiet. But that evening, my phone lit up with Mom's name. And when I finally answered, her voice was so calm that it frightened me more than yelling would have. Kara, she said, I'm only going to tell you this once. You're going to fix what you did to your sister. And before I could answer, she added, because if you don't, your father and I are going to make sure you understand exactly what it costs to turn your back on this family. Mom's voice stayed unnervingly calm on the phone. Kara, I'm only going to tell you this once. You're going to fix what you did to your sister. I sat on the edge of the bed while Daniel watched me from across the room, already able to tell from my expression who was calling. What exactly did I do to Emily? I asked. Mom exhaled sharply. You abandoned her when she needed you. She's drowning in debt and you're standing there pretending this is some moral lesson. I almost laughed. Interesting. Yesterday you told her the debt was her responsibility. Silence stretched between us. That is different, Mom finally said. Your father and I are her parents. You're her sister. You've been helping her all this time, and now you're stopping just to punish her. I rubbed my forehead. No, Mom. I stopped because she lied for you, helped you attack me in my own house, and publicly made me look like the problem because she thought you were going to pay her bills. Mom immediately snapped. Emily was trying to keep this family together. No, Emily was trying to keep herself in your good graces. Mom's tone changed then, the sweetness disappearing completely. You're becoming very selfish, Kara. That word almost made me smile because I had heard it my entire life whenever I stopped doing something convenient for them. If I refused to loan money, selfish. If I missed a family event because Noah was sick, selfish. If I disagreed with Emily, jealous. Every label had always served the same purpose: make me uncomfortable enough to surrender. If protecting my son makes me selfish, I said, then I'm fine with that, Mom scoffed. This isn't about Noah anymore. It was always about Noah. You just don't like that I noticed. Daniel sat beside me and silently held out his hand. I took it. Mom continued, Your sister needs help. You will continue the payments you've been making. I stared at the wall. No. She paused. Excuse me? I said no. Another pause, longer this time. I could almost picture her sitting beside Dad, both of them shocked that the daughter who always eventually folded wasn't folding. Then she reached for the weapon she clearly believed would end the argument. If you refuse to help your sister, Mom said coldly, your father and I will remove you from the will. I blinked, then looked at Daniel. He had heard it through the phone. His eyebrows lifted. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. Years earlier, that threat might have terrified me. I might have apologized immediately, imagined myself losing some future security, and run back into line. But after everything that had happened, it sounded almost absurd. You're laughing, Mom demanded. Yes, I said, because now I understand. Understand what? You promised Emily money to make her choose you. When you got what you wanted, you refused to give it to her. Now you're threatening me with future money because you think the same trick will work twice. Mom's voice hardened. Your father and I have worked very hard for what we have. Then keep it. Kara, seriously, keep all of it. Daniel squeezed my hand as Mom went silent. For the first time in my life, I realized how much of my relationship with my parents had been built around things that hadn't even happened yet. Future help, future approval, future inheritance, future forgiveness. They always kept something just beyond reach, and I kept behaving as though eventually I would earn it. You're making a huge mistake, Mom finally said. No, I answered quietly. My mistake was believing that if I gave enough, paid enough, apologized enough, and stayed useful enough, you would eventually treat me like Emily mattered less than me sometimes. But you don't even treat Emily well. You just use different things to control both of us. Mom hissed. Don't speak about your father and me like we're monsters. Then stop behaving like people who use money to decide who deserves love. Before she could answer, I added, and don't call Daniel. Don't show up here. Don't contact Noah. We're done for now. Then I hung up. For several seconds, I stared at my phone. Daniel finally asked, How do you feel? I expected the answer to be devastated. Instead, I said, Tired. He nodded, then stopped carrying them. That night, I blocked Mom, Dad, and Emily. I blocked their numbers, muted their emails, and changed the privacy settings on my social media. It felt extreme for about 10 minutes. Then it felt peaceful. The next morning, I woke up without checking my phone for angry messages. Noah climbed into bed between Daniel and me and started telling us about a dream involving dinosaurs on a spaceship. As I listened to him, something inside me settled. This was my family, not the people who could make me feel guilty enough to abandon the person sitting right in front of me. The campaign continued without my participation. Cousins sent messages asking what happened. An aunt told me life was too short to hold grudges. One of Mom's friends wrote that a mother's heart can only take so much. I didn't argue with anyone. I didn't post screenshots. I didn't write a dramatic response exposing the airport situation. Daniel asked whether I wanted to tell everyone the truth, but I shook my head. Anyone who actually cares can ask me directly. A few people did, and I told them exactly what happened. Some apologized immediately. Others became strangely quiet once they realized the story wasn't as simple as Mom had made it sound. The most surprising part was how quickly I stopped caring who believed me. For years, I had treated my family's reputation like something I was responsible for protecting. Once I let go of that responsibility, their version of me stopped having power. Christmas arrived several months later. A thick envelope came addressed in Mom's handwriting. Daniel placed it on the kitchen counter. Want me to throw it away? I stared at it for a while. No, leave it. It sat there for 3 days. Eventually I opened it, but only because curiosity won. The letter was exactly what I expected. Mom wrote about family traditions, how devastated Dad was, how confused Emily's children were about why Aunt Kara had disappeared, and how painful it was that Noah was being kept away from his grandparents. There was no apology for lying about the vacation, no acknowledgement that Noah had been deliberately excluded, no mention of the scene at our house or the Facebook posts. They had rewritten the entire conflict into a tragedy, where I had inexplicably abandoned everyone. I folded the letter, put it back into the envelope, and dropped it in the trash. Emily continued trying longer than our parents did. Her messages changed depending on what she needed. Sometimes they were angry. I can't believe you're doing this to me. Sometimes sentimental. Remember when we used to stay awake talking all night? Sometimes desperate. The minimum payments are killing me. Please, just help me this month. Once she sent a picture of Mia and Jack with the caption, "They miss you." That one almost worked. I sat staring at it for several minutes before Daniel found me. "You can love the kids without letting Emily use them to pull you back in," he said. I knew he was right. I never blocked Mia or Jack from my life. They were children and had done nothing wrong, but I refused to let Emily turn access to them into another financial obligation. About 6 months later, Aunt Linda accidentally told me my parents had officially rewritten their wills. She called under the pretense of checking on me and eventually said, "I don't know if you heard, but your parents changed some things legally." I knew immediately what she meant. They removed me? Linda became uncomfortable. They're leaving most of everything to Emily and the children. I expected pain. There was some, but not because of the money. It hurt because even after everything, a small, childish part of me had hoped my parents would eventually realize what they had done and come looking for me with an apology instead of another punishment. But they had chosen the punishment. I thanked Linda for telling me and ended the call. Daniel found me afterward, sitting alone on the porch. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said after thinking about it. "I actually am." The strangest thing was that the inheritance threat became almost funny once I understood the numbers. My parents weren't extraordinarily wealthy. There was a house, some retirement savings, and probably enough assets to matter, but nothing that would transform my life. I had spent years unconsciously treating that future inheritance like some enormous prize because they talked about it constantly. Losing it forced me to calculate what it had actually cost me emotionally to remain eligible. Endless favors. Loans that never came back. Vacations purchased because I wanted to belong. Silence when Emily crossed boundaries. Apologies for things I hadn't done. Accepting that Noah would always somehow be considered slightly less legitimate than Emily's children. When I added everything together, the inheritance suddenly looked less like money I had lost, and more like a fee I had finally refused to keep paying. Emily eventually stopped asking for monthly money. I heard through relatives that she consolidated some debt, took extra work, sold a few things, and downsized. Apparently, Mom and Dad helped occasionally, but never nearly as much as she expected. I didn't celebrate her struggle. Part of me genuinely hoped she figured things out. What I couldn't do anymore was rescue her from every consequence, while she continued choosing people who treated both of us badly. Months passed without direct contact. Then one evening I received an email from her with only 2 sentences. "I understand why you're angry. I wish things had happened differently." I read it several times. There was still no, "I'm sorry." No admission that she had participated. No acknowledgement of Noah. I closed the email without answering. A year after the canceled vacation, Daniel and I took Noah on a trip of our own. Nothing extravagant. We rented a small place near the beach, ate overpriced ice cream, built terrible sandcastles, and let Noah stay awake far later than he should have. One afternoon he ran ahead of us toward the water, laughing so hard he could barely breathe. Daniel slipped his hand into mine and said, "You know what's funny?" "What?" "This probably cost less than the trip you almost took with them." I laughed. "Probably." Then he looked at Noah and said, "Better company too." I watched my son turn around and wave both arms at us, yelling for us to hurry, and for the first time the airport memory didn't hurt. It felt distant, almost like something that had happened to another woman. My parents never apologized. Emily never gave me the apology I once thought I needed. Their will remained changed, and as far as I know they still tell some people that I destroyed the family over a vacation. Maybe that version helps them sleep at night. I don't need to correct it anymore, because I know exactly what happened. They invited me on a child-free trip, accepted the tickets I bought, brought Emily's children anyway, and expected me to accept that my own son mattered less. When I finally refused, they tried guilt, lies, public humiliation, debt, and inheritance to drag me back into place. None of it worked. For years, I thought being loved by my family meant proving how much I was willing to sacrifice for them. It took one canceled vacation to understand the truth. People who love you don't keep testing how much disrespect you'll tolerate before walking away. Sometimes the most important thing you can give your child isn't another vacation, another gift, or another family tradition. Sometimes it's showing him that being related to someone does not give them permission to treat him like he matters less. And that was the part my parents never understood. I didn't walk away because they refused to pay for Noah's ticket. I walked away because they expected me to agree that he wasn't worth one.